All right, this is Matthew Matt with my last little mini lecture for 2300, and I just want to talk about what I saw as some of the big ideas in our course this semester. So one of the biggest things I hope that you take away is that math teaching can be more meaningful than what we see in a lot of, or in sort of a typical classroom in the US. Math is often a challenging subject for students. It's not always students' favorite subject, and there are some things that are challenging and difficult about mathematics. But one of the main reasons people don't like it, or a lot of students come away from school not liking it, is because it's taught in a way that's just not meaningful to them or not very accessible to them. So part of what I hope that this class helped you do is question your assumptions about what math and about what math teaching has to look like or can look like. And hopefully you've seen some examples both of what we've done and in some of the things we've read about in real classrooms about how it might look different and how there's a range of possibilities about how we can approach topics. One of the biggest ideas here is that any math that you need to teach in grades 4 through 9, any concept or topic or big idea like that can be turned into a meaningful problem or problems that children can explore. There are some things like definitions or small things that are more minor like that that are a little harder to problematize, but otherwise most concepts in math can be turned into problems that kids can explore. Now that doesn't mean it's always easy to do or always obvious how to do that, but there are a lot of resources to think about for how to transform math in these ways. Related to that is the idea that the why behind mathematics, either why it works, why say a formula works the way it does, or an algorithm works the way it does, or why we might care about it or want to use it, either within the world of math or in real life, can be made accessible to students. And if we're not able to make that accessible to students, then it's worth really questioning whether this is the math they need to be learning right now, or if the way that we're teaching the math right now is really worthwhile, and we might want to think about how to repackage that. Related to this theme is the idea that people learn best through appropriately challenging problems. It just turns out that if I get up and lecture and tell people to memorize my strategy and practice it a bunch, it doesn't work well for most kids. Yes, some kids are going to learn math that way and do really well, but that's part of what contributes to the myth that there's some math people who just get it and then everyone else is not math people. It's because we're teaching in a very limited way that only works for a few students. So we really want to think about how we can problematize the math curriculum in a way that is challenging but also appropriate for where kids are, so that they can learn concepts through problems instead of just memorizing other people's ways of thinking. One of the ways we can do this is to open math up by thinking about lots of strengths. And that's something we talked a lot about this semester. You had to think of multiple strengths on your portfolio entries. What are the many ways that someone can be strong in or smart in mathematics? What are the many ways someone can contribute? And when I start to think about all the ways to be smart at math, I start to make more open problems that have more ways of contributing and participating, and that's open to more students. It invites more students into the math classroom. Now let's talk about some specific strategies that I hope you take away from this class or think about as a teacher. The first and maybe biggest one is that I want it to be your default impulse as a teacher to ask questions. Before you jump in with your own thinking, before you try to help the student figure it out, you ask questions. And that helps you understand the child, it helps you understand where they are, and most importantly, it helps you identify their math strengths. That was another big theme of this semester, different math strengths. So how can you identify those in your kids? And one of the ways you can do it is by asking questions. And that's going to really help you figure out how to build on their strengths instead of just taking over and imposing your own thinking. We talk a lot about the real world. So I want you to carefully think about the role of the real world in your classroom and in the problems you choose. We talked about math tasks that don't really have a real world component. These are important. They're an important part of math. And kids should have opportunities to do those kinds of problems. They might be simple patterns or problems about, sort of number problems or algebraic problems like that. And those are important. And it's worth talking explicitly to kids about the idea that there are kind of different versions or genres of mathematics. Sometimes math is more of a puzzle or something we explore in its own right. And other times it's connected to the real world. We talked about real enough problems. These are problems that have some kind of story or context with them, but it's not really the focus. The real world is just there to help us think about the math. The number one thing we want to be careful about is that they can't get too fake that they become problematic, or where the real world is so fake that it teaches kids to not use their real world thinking in the classroom, because that's a real problem. We want to be careful about that. And then finally, we talked about more authentic problems, problems where we're really thinking about the real world, we're thinking carefully about the context, maybe we're engaged in mathematical modeling. And these might be around everyday topics like how to choose a really good cell phone plan or what's a difficult hiking trail. Or they might be about more overtly political topics like prison population or school issues of school discipline or voting or things like that. The difference here too between sociopolitical and critical, they're both about political issues, but critical problems or lessons invite the student to question why things are like this. They invite the student to ask, is this fair? Why are things like this? How could things be more fair or just? What could we do to change the system? Those kinds of questions are something that math has a role in helping answer. We need to think about other disciplines, but math can help us think about answers to those questions. And we want kids to have some opportunities to do that. So I want to clarify, I'm not saying one of these is more important than the other. Kids need opportunities to do all three kinds of tasks, math tasks, real enough tasks, and various kinds of authentic tasks. What I want you to do as a teacher is to be able to be really thoughtful about how you're bringing these in, where you're bringing them in throughout your curriculum. And then finally, I want you thinking about how are my contexts in my math problems serving as a mirror and a window for my students? How am I making sure that everyone in my class gets a chance to see themselves or the things that they care about or the things that their community and family cares about showing up in the curriculum, so it's a mirror? And how am I making sure that people get a chance to see other points of view, both mathematically and about real world issues? That's not something you're going to accomplish in every single lesson. It's more about something you're going to accomplish over a year or over a whole course. We talked about effective group work. Good group work works well when it's accessible for and inclusive of all students. It brings everybody in and it gives everybody a chance to work with the mathematics. We can do that by setting expectations about how we're going to behave and act in groups and reinforcing them as a teacher. Maybe we're taking turns sharing answers. In some cases, we can physically share materials, and that requires students to collaborate. It's also most effective when everyone is held accountable. All the students are required to know the content. We might try to build a classroom culture of thinking of ourselves as responsible for each other's learning. One of the ways we did that in our class was group quizzes, where I might come around and pick someone at random and they have to explain the solution to the problem the group's been working on. So everyone needs to be held accountable for knowing the content. We need to support each other in doing that. We used a lot of technology this semester. Specifically, we looked at spreadsheets, 3D modeling tools, and the Desmos graphing and geometry tools. Sometimes people are worried about technology, that it's going to do the thinking for the student, but technology is a real part of our world. It's a tool kids need to know how to use. And while that can be a concern, technology can also open up opportunities to do more advanced or more interesting kinds of thinking. So I tried to give some examples of what that might look like and how the technology can help us look at more complex problems. Finally, I want to emphasize as a teacher, you need to keep learning. You're not going to be an expert in all these things. Master teachers continue to talk about how they learn year after year and improve in their mathematics. Jumping back to the first bullet here about asking questions, that's one of the best ways that you can keep learning. Asking real questions to your students about their own math thinking and then really working to understand that thinking is a really powerful way for you to keep growing as a teacher. But there are also professional organizations like the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. There are your more experienced colleagues, there are people like me. So there's lots of ways to keep learning and keep growing in your practice in the classroom. I just want to end by saying thank you. I had a really great semester. I hope that you got something out of this class. It was hard, obviously, to switch to online in the middle of the semester. I am glad we were able to get to know each other before that happened, and we were still able to interact some after it happened. I'll see most of you either next semester or the following year in 3300, but some of you I won't. So please stay in touch. I really enjoy hearing from former students, either while you're doing your internship, if you have questions about things, or once you're in your classroom, if you want to talk about math lessons or anything else. I really always enjoy hearing from students. So for those of you who I won't see again, best of luck as you move forward in your careers. All right, thanks a lot.